Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to the Pink Flame of Liberty broadcast on 1360 KHNC. Remember, you can always contact me at pinkflameofliberty@gmail.com, or please watch my YouTube channel, which is also called Pink Flame of Liberty. I would greatly appreciate it. As you know, I am in the middle of quite a hectic campaign season to be reinstated, re-elected, however you'd like to put it, as LNC secretary, and I am traveling every weekend, so these are pre-recorded, sometimes in the wee hours of the morning. As those who are watching the video of this on YouTube can tell, they might think that I am packing my baggage for my flight to Philadelphia, where I'm not going to be in Philadelphia. Actually, I'm flying into Pittsburgh. We'll be in Williamsport, Pennsylvania this weekend. They might think I packed the bags for my trip under my eyes. Yeah, it gets tiring. Politics can be a lot of work. But what I've decided we're going to cover this week, I have in my paws a printout because I didn't want to watch it again, of the State of the Union address by our beloved, and amongst other names we may use, President Biden. It's much more tolerable to read than it was to listen to. Though let me give some compliments. Maybe they're backhanded compliments, but let me say some good things that I thought about the address. It was much more coherent than I thought it was. I think he got like some kind of epinephrine shot jabbed into his heart or something beforehand to make him not seem like Weekend at Bernie's, because he did not mess up very much and he actually seemed coherent, and it seems like the most excitement that Nancy Pelosi has had in a very long time. Boy, did she get all hot and bothered over that speech. That was the best part of it, just watching the up and down, and the look of just sheer ecstasy in her eyes that he didn't make a bumbling fool out of himself. But I wanted to give a libertarian response to many points that he made. I'm not so arrogant as to say the libertarian response, because I quite obviously don't speak for all libertarians. I barely speak for myself. I barely agree with myself on some days. But I figured this would be something interesting for our show. So we're going to go through this and let's see what we can suss out as to some libertarian responses to what he said. I need to put on the glasses for this one. And he started with the usual, pleasantries, but the one thing that got me, he said, last year COVID-19 kept us apart. This year we're finally together again. Well, nothing in the alleged science has changed, Mr. President. It's just political reality, isn't it? Not that I even care which of the blue or the reds happen to be in power at any one time. I do think they both stink, but midterms are coming up. The Democrats are fearing a red wave. So now all of a sudden they are backtracking. They are backtracking on some of the COVID doom and gloom. No, COVID-19 didn't keep us apart. Bad science and stupid governmental mandates, rather than trusting people to make the best decisions for their own health and their own family. Your destruction of the economy. The worldwide absolute panic over something that is eminently survivable, that is what allegedly kept us apart. Didn't keep me apart. I kept my life as normal as possible. But anyway, no, you can't blame it on COVID. The blame falls squarely on the shoulders of the government. And it went on and on. We're all fellow Americans. Constitution, mom, apple pie, get it, yeah. And an unwavering resolve that freedom will always triumph over tyranny. I wish that were the case, but last year it did not. And the tyrant was you. The tyrant was others like you. The tyrant was our own government. He immediately then progressed into, as I think he should have, the escalations that are happening between the Russia and Ukraine. This is probably the closest we have been to absolute utter disaster for mankind in most of our lifetimes. Though I do remember when I was in high school, the waning days of the Cold War. But for people who were born after me, this must be a very terrifying time for you. And I do feel for you, because the threat is very real. Now, I don't think it's likely that we're going to be encountering any kind of nuclear holocaust, but it certainly is more likely than it was 6 months ago. And that alone is very terrifying. And I think we need to be very, very, very careful about what we wish for and what our rhetoric is. So I do think he did need to turn to that, though I don't think what he said would necessarily be what libertarians would say. We are not the policemen of the world. And there was something that libertarian commentator Dave Smith said on his show the other day that I agree with. When you are playing around with the potential destruction of life as we know it, somebody has to blink, or someone has to make the first move or the first concession, and it has to be the more powerful person, which in this circumstance, at least us as an outsider, it's us. That perhaps we should offer in order to keep these escalations from escalating. Did I say escalations from escalating? But I think you know what I mean, that Ukraine will never be part of NATO. I actually don't think there should be such a thing as NATO, but as long as we have it, perhaps that's something that we can offer. One thing we cannot offer, one thing we cannot even contemplate, is sending American lives over there to die. And unfortunately, some of the language that he used, I do think is very provoking, that I think is beating the drums of war. Let me read some of it. And I am not going to pretend like I have all the answers. This is obviously going to be a continuing discussion. President Biden said he thought the West and NATO wouldn't respond, he being Putin. He thought he could divide us at home, in this chamber, and in this nation. He thought he could divide us in Europe as well, but Putin was wrong. We are ready. We are united, and that's what we did. We stayed united. What exactly does this mean? I feel for the Ukrainian people, but I do not believe that we, America, needs to be even hinting in the slightest that we are going to be going to war with Russia. We need to do everything we possibly can to avoid that. He had also said, we've learned the lesson that when dictators do not pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos. I don't think we've learned the lesson that American interventionism is what has led to more dictators and more chaos. Blowback is real. Ron Paul said it. Harry Brown had said it. And the funny thing is, I find it wildly ironic that you would talk about dictators paying a price for their aggression when you yourself have acted like a dictator and committed aggression against the American people, all in the name of a virus. So he talks about something that the United, was it 27 nations? Let me get right here. Yep, the 27 members of the European Union. And then he mentions even Switzerland are inflicting pain on Russia and supporting the people of the Ukraine. Now, you're inflicting pain. Do you think you're inflicting pain on Putin? In some ways you are. I'm sure there's political pain. But the ruling class doesn't suffer. Do you remember what Madeleine Albright said? About that it was worth the cost of the loss of, was it 500,000 Iranian babies for the sanctions we put on Iran for the non-existent weapons of mass destruction. You're not inflicting pain on Russia. Russia is not just this abstract concept. There are real people there. There are real people there who are just like you and just like me, who do not want this. And those are the people that will suffer. The rulers won't. They might ultimately. but it is the actual everyday people who are human beings like us that will suffer. And this is where I absolutely disagree with the statement that had been put out by the chair of the National Libertarian Party. Most of her response to the State of the Union address, well, I don't think it was an energy level that I would have liked to have seen from the chair. Most of it was good. It wasn't great, but it was good. But when she said, well, sanctions are a reasonable response, no, they are not. Sanctions are not a reasonable response. Sanctions are an act of war against the innocent populace. That's what they are. And you need to face that. All of us need to face that. President Biden needs to face that. So he says, together along with our allies, we are right now enforcing powerful economic sanctions. You know the saying, this is the way? This is not the way. All right, I will continue talking with you all after this break. Okay, we are back, and I am sure on this topic, and as we will be discussing it in the coming weeks, we'll have lots of feels and opinions. Remember, again, you can always contact me at pinkflameofliberty@gmail.com or through my YouTube channel of the same name, which is Pink Flame of Liberty. Now, I wanted to continue where we left off to say, I said, what isn't an answer? What is the answers? I honestly don't know. As these events unfold, I'm sure we will be discussing a lot of answers. But that just because we might not have, or I might not have, the exact right answer doesn't mean we can't point out wrong answers. And I'm going to be getting to the part in the speech where President Biden does say, no, we're not going to be sending troops to the Ukraine. And then he turns around and basically says we are, but not really there, just someplace. We'll get to it, okay? I did want to acknowledge that later on in his speech, he did explicitly deny what I was saying we must not do, but I want to explain why I don't find that assurance very assuring. Okay, this is going to require glasses once again. So, President Biden said the United States Department of Justice is assembling a dedicated task force to go after the crimes of the Russian oligarchs. We will seize their yachts, their luxury apartments, their private jets. We are coming for your ill-begotten, I think it's ill-gotten, doesn't matter, ill-begotten gains. And how exactly are you going to be coming for them, which presumably are in Russia? I don't know, maybe he's seizing their yachts, luxury apartments, and everything in other parts of the world under what pretense? I don't see how that's necessarily related, but okay, you're certainly not seizing them in Russia unless you are sending people to forcibly do so in Russia. And I just don't see how, oh, dear me, you're taking my yacht. Well, I guess we're going to give up on our invasion of the Ukraine, which historically has been, they say the Ukraine, which has historically been part of Russia. Not saying that gives them a right to do what they're doing. I'm just stating a geographical and historical reality. It says, and I'm announcing we will join our allies in closing off American airspace to all Russian flights. This somewhat hits home a little bit. We had someone who was an American who was supposed to be helping us at the Libertarian Party of Colorado convention, which is next weekend, and he's now stuck in Russia because this is not harming Putin. Not directly, at least. It's harming people who are now trapped in Russia, who will be suffering under these economic sanctions. And I realize that the intent is that the people will then force the government, who will then stop their aggression. In a country such as Russia, where you're saying you have this terrible dictator what kind of weapons and pressure do you really think the people are going to be able to bring to bear before thousands and thousands die and suffer? It says the ruble has already lost 30% of its value. Imagining that happening here and the suffering that would happen here. The Russian economy is reeling, and Putin alone is the one to blame. Okay, I'm sure that gives great comfort to families in Russia who will be starving. Together with our allies, we are providing support to the Ukrainians in their fight for freedom, military assistance. Hold on. I thought later he's going to say we weren't doing that. Economic assistance, humanitarian assistance. Unfortunately, it's very short on the humanitarian assistance. It says we're giving more than $1 billion in direct assistance to Ukraine. Now, here's the problem. You're giving it. Where did you get this from? You got it from stealing from Americans. That's how you got it. Americans are some of the most charitable people on the planet. It's been said over and over. That's not a sentence that's unique to me. It's been said, and it's true. If Americans got to keep that $1 billion of their own money, they could choose to assist in ways that they choose. But instead, it's stolen, and you so-called rulers who think you have the right to do that, which is aggression against the American people, to just send it overseas. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't suffering in the Ukraine. And I think it is the Ukraine. Forgive me if my terminology is not exactly spot on. But there's suffering here as well. And the fact that there's suffering elsewhere does not give you the right to steal from Americans. This is where I'm getting very specifically libertarian. It's not your money to give away. It should be the individual decisions of individual Americans because it's their money. You are not a hero for taking stolen money and giving it to somebody else. Period. End of story. It says, but let me be clear, our forces are not engaged and will not engage in the conflict with Russian forces in Ukraine. Then what does it mean earlier when you said military assistance? It's incomprehensible. But never. Is I guess all I can say. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies in the event that Putin decides to keep moving west. So we may be engaging in World War III. That's basically what he's saying, but it won't be on Ukrainian soil. It'll just be on other soil that, in order, all related back to Ukrainian soil. We need to be doing everything in our power and not threatening to be getting involved into World War III. As much as my heart bleeds for suffering people elsewhere, I'm not willing to destroy humanity over this. We need to find another way. And he talks about the mobilization of American ground forces. It's so easy when you call them forces and squadrons and deployments. But we are talking about people's sons and their daughters. As I have made crystal clear, he says, the United States and our allies will defend every inch of territory that is NATO territory with the full force of our collective power. Every single inch. Every single inch. So you're willing to cover every single inch with American blood and endanger every single life on this planet. And we're clear-eyed. Well, okay, at least you're clear-eyed about it. The Ukrainians are fighting back with pure courage, and yes, they are. It's their country to do so. Oh, boy. He says, to all Americans, I will be honest with you as I've always promised I would be. An honest politician. That is a rare thing indeed. A Russian dictator invading a foreign country has costs around the world. We've invaded foreign countries, but I guess it's okay when we do it. And I'm taking robust action to make sure the pain of our sanctions is targeted at the Russian economy, in other words, at the Russian people. And I will use every tool at our disposal to protect American businesses and consumers. As long as we're okay, right? It's okay. It's okay to hurt those people. Economic sanctions is an act of economic war. And it says tonight, we have worked with 30 other countries to release 60 million barrels of oil from reserves around the world. It's our own policies here why we are not more energy independent already here in our own country where we have our own oil. These steps will help blunt gas prices here at home. Oh, all of a sudden, you're worried about that, are you, eh? I know when, you're uber rich the way you are, it doesn't make a difference to whether you're going to be able to afford basic necessities because gas prices have gone up. But that's the reality for most people in this country, and you did that. It goes, but I know the news about what's happening can seem alarming. No, dear heart, it is alarming. And then we get to the first gaffe. To our fellow Ukrainian Americans who have forged a deep bond that connects our two nations, we stand with you. Putin may circle Kiev with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. Where did Iran come from in all of this? I thought we were talking about the Ukraine. First slip up. There's another one that's even more amusing later. Okay. Remember, as we continue on this, I don't even know if we're going to get through this whole thing tonight. We're moving on to the pandemic next, but you can always contact me with your thoughts, ideas, complaints, if you wish, at pinkflameofliberty@gmail.com. And sorry for such a bummer topic so far, but this is a harsh and deadly reality that unfortunately we have to face. Another unfortunate reality is that putting on this show does take funds and support. So please, if you are interested in becoming a sponsor and running advertising on the show at very reasonable rates, please get in touch at pinkflameofliberty@gmail.com. Talk to you in a few. Okay, and welcome back. So I think we're done, particularly with his speech on the Ukraine, and it's moving on to the pandemic. And this is where things really infuriated me because of the, what do you call it? Alternative facts? Is that the word that we're using now? So it says, in America, we've lived through two of the hardest years this nation has ever faced. Really? Really? There was an actual deadly pandemic, and barely 100 years ago, the Spanish flu. I think that was probably harder. Certainly killed a whole lot more people. But no, here's the two hardest years this nation has ever faced. You don't think World War I and World War II were harder? You don't think the internment of the Japanese was hard? Okay, President Biden. Never mind that this was all self-inflicted by the government, infringing upon the civil rights of Americans. Okay, the pandemic has been punishing. No, it was the government's response to something that is basically a glorified flu that was punishing. And so many families are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to keep up with the rising cost of food, gas, housing, and so much more. That is the government's fault and your fault. And you're acting like it's just this something out there that just things happened. Something happened. I don't know. This is just infuriating me. I understand like many of you did. No, you don't understand. You are a rich politician. I know you're going to go on to tell us about your hard scrabble upbringing. Oh boy. That's why one of the first things I did as president was to fight was fight to pass the American Rescue Plan. You mean to steal from other Americans to give to other Americans, either through inflation by just printing money or through outright theft through raised taxes and other ways of government confiscation. He says, I grew up in a family when the price of food went up. It was felt throughout the family. It had an impact. Do you feel it now? I doubt it. You look like you live in pretty well. How many houses do you have? Because people were hurting because of your policies and the policies of your predecessors and government policies in general. Few pieces of legislation have been done more at a critical moment in our history to lift us out of crisis. Legislation does nothing to lift us out of crisis. We lift ourselves out of crisis. The government is not our savior. If you need a savior, go find a religion. It fueled our efforts to vaccinate the nation. And how's that doing for people that have had adverse reactions or have had to choose between risking adverse reactions and losing their job? It delivered immediate economic relief to tens of millions of Americans, which would not have been necessary if you didn't close down the country. And I know that didn't happen all under your watch. Some of it happened under Trump's watch. I blame both of you, but you're the one giving this speech, President Biden. So that's why I'm laying the blame there. Using the $2 trillion tax cut passed in the previous administration that benefited the top 1% of Americans, the American Rescue Plan helped working people and left no one behind. No one, huh? Okay. Taxation is theft. Nobody should be taxed, whether it's the top 1% or the bottom. There are other ways other than force. And it worked. It created jobs. No, government does not create jobs. Businesses and people create jobs. And in fact, you can only claim there's been an economic growth or creation of jobs because of the destruction of jobs that happened before. If I go out and destroy 100 businesses, and then 5 more the next year pop up, I can say there's a 5% growth. But what's the net deficit? That's what we need to know. The economy grew at a rate of 5.7% last year. Okay, that's exactly what I was talking about. For the past 40 years, we were told that tax breaks for those at the top and benefits would trickle down and everyone would benefit, and everyone does benefit. Because that's how we get innovation. People who have excess money that aren't worried, like you, people like you, about where their next meal is coming from, are the ones that invest in the things that make lives better for everyone. I am sorry you are so short-sighted and so envious, or trying to, I won't even say envious because you're one of these rich people, but trying to create envy for political gain. But trickle-down theory led to weaker economic growth, lower wages, bigger deficits, and a widening gap between those at the top and everyone else in nearly a century. No, government policies did that. Oh, boy. It says, invest in America. Okay, great. Not the government, though. Each of us investing in each other. Educate Americans. Great. Don't use force and theft to do so. Grow the workforce. Build the economy. This is all things that the free market does, not the government. It does it better when the government gets out of the way. America used to have the best roads, bridges, and airports on earth. Now our infrastructure is ranked 13th in the world. Now, I'm not an expert on infrastructure. I do not know all of the reasons why our infrastructure has went down. It's something I could research. It's something we could talk about on a future show. But I can nearly guarantee you that the main problem was government. Maybe I'm wrong. I seriously doubt it, but I'm not going to opine upon something that I'm not terribly educated about. said, we're done talking about infrastructure weeks. We're now talking about an infrastructure. But the way they define infrastructure has been a bit amusing. It says, we'll create good jobs for millions of Americans. You do not create jobs. Businesses create jobs, and you need to get out of businesses' way. And we'll do it all to withstand the devastating effects of climate change and promote environmental justice. I like how justice can just be appended to any word. I'd like to have State of the Union justice, in which case you're not shoving a load of bullcrap down our throats. How about that kind of justice, President Biden? We'll build a national network of 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. With what money? Stolen money? If electric vehicles are what educated Americans and people who do care about the future of the planet for their children, which people do, are needed, and that is the way to go, private enterprise will see that there is a way to make money there, and they will do it. Government will only do it worse. We are going to provide affordable, high-speed internet for every American. By taking from other Americans? If you live in a rural area, there are certain trade-offs you make. And some of them are that you do not have certain amenities that are available in larger cities. It is not up to the government to make rural areas have those same amenities. That is a choice you make when you live in a rural area. But you also get certain benefits that people in large, densely packed cities don't have. Everything in life is about choices. Eventually, I believe that with the improvement of cellular technology, everyone's going to have the internet in their pocket. They will not need affordable, high-speed internet everywhere in the way that he is speaking. It will be something you will just be able to have. And that was not created by government. That was created pretty much by Apple, if we want to be honest. 4,000 projects have already been announced. Many of you have announced them in your districts. Okay. And tonight, I'm announcing we'll start fixing over 65,000 miles of a highway and 1,500 bridges in disrepair. Infrastructure, actual infrastructure. If we're going to have government, I guess that's one of the least objectionable uses of it. When we use taxpayers' dollars, you mean stolen dollars, to rebuild America, we're going to do it by buying American. And here's the thing. Roads and infrastructure and things like that can be paid for through use fees. The people that use it, which a lot of it is going to be businesses that use it to deliver goods, can be the people that pay for it, rather than you steal it, for instance, from someone who doesn't use it. There are fair ways to pay for things that are being used and have it being paid for by the people that are actually using it. The federal government spends about $600 billion a year to keep this country safe and secure. And how much waste is in that? And no, the federal government spends $600 billion of stolen money to do so. You don't think people want to be safe and secure? And that if they could earmark where they wanted funds to go, that they would do so perhaps in a different manner, in a more cost-efficient manner. There's been a law in the books for almost a century to make sure taxpayer dollars support American jobs and businesses. Protectionism sounds good on paper, and it has a great emotional appeal. And if people want to buy American, I encourage them to do so. But it should not be the federal government's job to ensure that happens. All right, we'll continue again after the break. Okay, we are back, and I want to skip ahead a little bit because I do want to finish this time. I'm getting tired of President Biden already, and I thought I was before. Remember, you can always contact me at pinkflameofliberty@gmail.com, or you may also find me at the YouTube channel of the same name. Alrighty. He goes on now, and this is just something that really gets my goat. Give me my goat back. Talks about how the profiteering, as he puts it, of drug companies. But this is a result of government-granted patents and the very, very, very expensive requirements for trials. So to blame it solely on the greed of drug companies, and I do think there is, definitely big pharma greed. I definitely do think there's big pharma corruption. But to claim that is all it's about and that they're not in bed with the government is delusional beyond belief. So it talks about the high cost of insulin, and I agree. The cost of insulin is high. Remove some of the government regulations, remove the fake idea of intellectual property, and you will see things go down and competition increase. I know to some people that seems counterintuitive, but the fact is, just because something may benefit you, or just because you may be, say, an artist and go, how in the world can I make money without this type of government protection? That isn't the question. The question isn't how can you make money. That's almost like saying, well, if I don't feel like working, how am I going to eat? Well, you're not. The question is it really property? Can you own thoughts? That'll be a whole other show I think I will do as to why I am opposed to the idea of intellectual property. I realize that can be a bit controversial, even amongst other libertarians. He goes on that, and the problem, once again, is government. Get government out of the way, and the competition will start to take care of itself. But no, the solution, he says, is government. It's government breaking your legs and then selling you at inflated prices the canes and crutches you need to walk. And it says, cut energy costs for families an average of $500 a year by combating climate change. Well, I don't know how you're saving money by spending money, but okay, that must be the new economics. It says, let's provide investment tax credits to weatherize your home. Well, if you need a certain amount of money to run the government, which I dispute, but you would not, these tax credits coming from somewhere. The money is still coming from somewhere. It says we could also change the standard of living for hardworking folks to cut the cost of childcare. How so? Are you going to be determining the wages of child care workers, or are you going to be making those of us who don't have children bear a greater tax burden in order to relieve the tax burden on those who have children? There are many reasons I decided not to have children. I'm not going to pretend that the cost of them was the only factor, but it was certainly one of the factors because I had decided I was raised by a mother who primarily stayed home until I was older. And if I ever wanted to have children, I wanted to be able to do that myself, but I couldn't afford to. And one reason I couldn't afford to is because I was being taxed to pay for other people's children, and I deeply resented that, and I still do. I am still paying to educate and do things for other people's children when I've never had any of my own. If you want kids, great, pay for them. Continuing. It says, I was a single dad for 5 years raising 2 kids. I had a lot of help, though. Okay, what does any of this have to do with the State of the Union? I know your little folksy, homey stories take up time, and you think it makes you relatable. You're not relatable in the slightest. What does this have to do with anything? It says middle class and working folks shouldn't have to pay more than 7% of their income to care for their young children. Why not? Children are expensive. What are you going to do to control that? Give them money from other people like me? Cap the amount that child care providers can provide? Like, this is just fluff. This is just talking points. This is just feel-good points. Let's talk about the real nitty-gritty violence behind what you're saying. In order to give to some people, generally, on things like this, you have to take from others. In other issues, there isn't a fixed pie. But when it comes down to money, there's a fixed supply of money unless you're just going to create inflation by printing more. It says, my plan doesn't stop there. Oh, no, you are just going to take care of us from the womb to the tomb. You are going to become God, or government is, not you necessarily personally. More affordable housing. How are you going to enforce that? I can tell you in my own town, there's less affordable housing because of something else you talk about later, which is funding the police. When I thought the Democrats before were for defunding the police, I guess you held up your finger, with the, you licked it and held it up and decided that wasn't a popular idea. I don't know. I'm getting confused. I'm getting whiplash. Do you want to fund them or do you want to defund them? And then this funding you're talking about is federal funding. Well, I did not see that coming, did I? Federal funding of police. Yeah, that sounds very fascistic to me. And under my plan, nobody, let me say this again, nobody, yeah, I've heard this before, earning less than $400,000 a year will pay an additional penny in new taxes. Not a single penny. A, I don't believe you. And B, it all depends on how you define taxes. I guarantee you, in fees and licenses and in other increased costs, because those people who are paying more that you think are the rich that are, paying more, that are earning more than $400,000 a year, if they own businesses, that cost gets passed down. Everyone will pay. You are lying when you are acting like they will not. You are doing a shell game. I may be wrong, but my guess is if we took a secret ballot in this floor, we'd agree the present tax system isn't fair. Right, because it's not right to steal from people. But of course, that's not what you're saying. That's not what you're saying. You're just promoting class envy. I'm not looking to punish anybody. Say it enough times and maybe you and your supporters will believe it. But let's make corporations and wealthy Americans start paying their fair share. They are paying their fair share. You just would like them to pay more because you're creating class envy. If we were going to accept taxation, which I don't, a fair share would be the same percentage for everybody. You don't punish people for being successful. You don't say because you're more successful that you have an obligation to support other people, because you don't. You might choose to, and a lot of wealthy people do. But there is no inherent right to that. And when it comes down to corporations, I happen to be one of those libertarians who probably would agree with you on corporations because I don't believe corporations are a libertarian concept to begin with. They are creatures of the state that have limited liability and be able to escape responsibility for wrongs and harms that they do. So you will not see me defending corporations. But you also will not see me raising the lynch mob against people who just happen to make a lot of money. You have no right to force them to support other people. Now, do I think they should? If you are blessed, I'm a Christian. If you are blessed, do I think to him who has been given much, much is expected? Yes. You do that through social change. You do that through cultural change. You don't do that through government force. Let's be real here. And corporations have to compete. Well, I don't think corporations should exist to begin with, but companies, yes, they should have to compete. Their profits go up and your prices go up when they don't have to compete. If people are not using force and you don't allow politicians to be bought off in order to create regulations that make it harder for the price point of entry to get into the market to compete, there will be the competition. Once again, the primary problem is government. I'm not going to pretend that they're the only problem. They are not. But I don't even think we can see other problems until we get government out of the way. But you seem to think government is equivalent to, Jesus Christ or something. And then he goes, let's pass the Paycheck Fairness Act. What the heck is that? Raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Yeah, that won't raise the cost of anything. No, of course not. Because, how much businesses have to pay their employees have nothing to do with how much they charge their goods. Why don't we just raise it to $100 if it's that easy? You're going to raise it to $15 and the relative standard of living will stay the same because prices will raise commensurately. I know you like to rant about these alleged greedy businesses, but the fact is, the small businesses, the backbone of this country, make do on a slight profit margin, and you would kill it with this unless they raised prices. All right, that is all I have for you this week, and that's about all I could stomach. I look forward to talking to you next week, and until then, live free, mi guapas de libertad.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business, not because they want to